Well, good evening. I'm assuming we are now live on YouTube for the first time ever. So welcome to the question and answer session. This, as I say, is on YouTube today simply because I want to test the chat on YouTube, because we normally run these question and answer sessions in the Facebook group, which if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not a member, go and join. Just search for Tantrum Kitesurf on Facebook and go and join the group, not the page. There is a distinction. The group is basically where all the interaction happens. The page is not a lot goes on the page. So look for the group. You should be able to search by tag at the top, and then go and join us in the group, because these may well shift back to the group after tonight if the chat is no good here as well, because I do like the Facebook group, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, we'll see how the chat goes tonight, and then we'll see, which one works, which one doesn't, and play it by ear from there. But I just thought I would try YouTube tonight simply because Facebook has been a little bit rubbish with the chat in the last few weeks, and that people put questions in. They don't pop up in my chat, so I don't see them. They might enter them 3 or 4 times. I don't see them, and they're delayed by sort of 10 minutes. So it's just not very interactive. So the idea of doing this is to test the chat, see if it's a bit quicker. But again, same rules apply. If you do put a question and I don't answer it, it's probably just I haven't seen it. It won't be me ignoring you, unless you're being very rude, obviously, which I know you won't be, so it's not a problem. But yeah, so if I do ignore you guys, sorry, it's not intentional. Just keep putting your questions in, and I will come to them when I get to them. As I say, I'm not that familiar with the whole YouTube, and this is actually run through Google Hangouts, which I'm not familiar with at all. So it may take me a little while to kind of get my head around this and see what's going on. So usual format. If you've got any questions for me, kite surfing questions, not relationship questions. It's not gonna. I'm not the man to speak to about that for sure. Bang them in the chat, and I will come to them as I come to them. If this is anything like Facebook, there will be a slight delay. So expect it to take maybe a minute or two to come through to my end. You would have thought if we can do live video, you could do live chat, but it seems that it's just beyond these platforms at the moment. So yeah, any questions at all, bang them in the chat. We've got a few in the hopper, which I will begin with. So while I'm going through those, if you want to be sticking any questions that you've got into the chat so I can help you out with those points, that would be awesome. So let me swing back to my other window. Where are we? Okay, so here we go. So I've got a question from Ronald. I'm still fairly new to this amazing sport, about 6 months. I would like to know if it's necessary for me to fork out the huge dollars for the latest bar, or do I stick it out with my average bar that came with the kite? Will it make any difference to my skill level at this point? Well, Ronald, what I would say to that, mate, is the bar is... How do I get back to my other screen? There we go. Bar is an incredibly important bit of kit, but luckily it's also one of the most standardized bits of kit. And if it's not standard, then you can generally fairly easily make it standardized. So I would suggest stick with your old bar. Simply because a bar is a bar, basically. What you've got to, the things you've got to check for in a bar, the things that can go wrong with a bar. First of all, the lines can fray and snap. So check the lines. If there's any kind of, and you will see them, it's just like the line just gets thinner. It's almost like you've had a chunk cut out of the line. If you see that, then that's probably a good indication, okay, this line's about to snap. You might need to get the line replaced. Knots in your lines are another one. You want to make sure you get any knots out of your lines. But that's really the main, and kind of the trim and the actual line that runs through the center of the bar. Because depending on how it is, some bars have that sheathed in kind of plastic, some don't. And the bars that don't, that line tends to fray quite quickly. And when I say quite quickly, I mean over the course of months. So they're your major fail points. Check those bits. Check your lines. There's no major gouges, no knots in your lines. And check again that trim bar, the trim line, sorry. which is the line that runs through the center of the bar, that it's not fraying and wearing as well. Now, if it is one of them without the sheath, there will be a certain amount of fraying for sure. But as long as it's not, again, sort of looking really thin and like there's chunks coming out, because you certainly don't want that to snap. If that snaps, you've got problems when you're on the water. So they're the bits that you need to maintain. So as long as those 3 bits are good, you're fine. The other bit you would want to look at is the trim. Make sure that the trim works and you can pull it on and off and it's all good from there. After that, what you are concerned with is whether or not the actual the bar itself works for the kite you are going to use. Now, let me just draw a quick diagram here, because we have 2 types of bar. If you guys are watching this, if someone can just type something in the chat, just because it's all a bit quiet on my chat here, and I'm just a bit worried that there's something gone wrong with the chat again on YouTube, which would be epically awesome. Maybe I need to go and look at the actual. If I go and have a look here. Epic up here. Aha, right. Okay, so the chat's in there. Well, this is going to get mega confusing now. Okay. Right, cool. Hi, Mary. Hi, Jason. Hi, Janice. How's it going? I am right now. This is really weird because on my window, I've got no chat coming up, and I'm looking at myself on YouTube now, delayed by like 2 minutes, but here I can see the chat. So this is really horrible. I'm watching yourself 2 minutes ago. So what I'm going to do is just hide that bit off the screen. And now I can see the chat. So the chat is now working, guys. The chat is now working. We are good to go. Hi there, Yanis. How's it going, sir? Hi there, Ronnie. How are you guys? Good to see you all here. I'm glad that you made it over to YouTube. I was a bit worried that no one had actually find the link and follow it. So that's awesome. Good to see you are here. Hi there, Oscar. How are you, sir? So chat's working. That's good. So where were we? Sorry, Ronald, I was answering your question, mate. Good, Mary. Get typing away. I'll just finish this question. I'll be right on it. Now I can see the chat. Stick all your questions in there and we will be on it. So to answer your question on bars, there are 2 types of bar. We have this side here, and I'm going to do everything backwards here, which is what we call a low V, because you can see the center lines split low. They split just above the trim line. This is what's called a high V bar, because obviously the center line split high up the center line. Now, generally, a kite that's designed for this kind of bar will not fly on these lines. It might fly, but it generally won't be trimmed correctly. And depending on how high up or how low down this is, it will fly either worse or better, depending on the kite. And this is very different for every single kite. Some kites see, and I don't know the science behind this. It's obviously because it pulls the kite to a different shape, but some kites seem to fly fine when you swap them over. Some kites really don't. Sorry if I'm butchering names here. Sorry, Virgilius. Good to see you there too, sir. Good to see you there too. So the kites that are designed for these type of bars generally will not fly well on these type of bars, and vice versa. So this is what you need to be aware of when swapping bars back and forth between kites. If you've got a high V and you try to fly it on a kite that was designed for a low V, it's not going to work that well, and vice versa, or it might not work that well. Now, this is a big problem when you are a beginner, because when I say it won't work, what that might just mean is that it might just quite not fly properly. So it might just back stall faster than it's supposed to. It might front stall faster than it's supposed to, which basically means that your kite's not flying properly. But as a beginner, it's very, very difficult for you to tell if it's the kite or if it's you. You might think, it's just me. I just can't get used to this kite. It's just really difficult. And then someone else who's been flying for ages goes, whoa, that's awful. What's going on? There's something really, really wrong there. So it is worth just double checking that you are getting the right, high V on a high V kite, low V on a low V kite. And the problem you've got with the high V is, okay, well, where exactly is it? So this is why you're always better, if you can, flying the the bar that the kite came with, because it's been designed for it. So although you can, in theory, fly any kite on any bar, as long as it's like a 4-line kite on a 4-line bar, it's not always quite that simple. Another slight issue, and this is less of an issue these days, comes when you have a like a stopper ball. So when you've got some kind of, stopper system set up on the lines itself, which is designed to prevent the center lines running all the way through, which just makes it a bit tidier when you come to do the self-rescue. Now, most kites these days don't have them. They tend to be a thing of the past. But in olden days, we used to have these stopper balls, and what it meant is that your kite will fully depower, but it won't go any further than that. And that's great if you are flying the right kite. But what happens if you're flying a bar that's designed for 7-meter kite and you're now using a 12-meter kite? Well, that 12-meter is twice as big as the 7-meter, so it needs to run out twice as far as the 7-meter bar. So what was full depower on the 7-meter, i.e. where the stopper ball is, isn't necessarily on the 12. So again, bars with stopper balls, you need to be a little bit aware of this and where that stopper ball is. But generally, it won't be a problem. I would stick with the bar you've got. If it works, I would stick with it. I always think it's like when these manufacturers try and sell you 2 bars with your kites because you need a small bar and a big bar. Your bar will last much longer than your kites generally. Your 3 kites, 1 bar is absolutely fine as long as your bar is adjustable. He says, having never adjusted his bar in his life, but ideally I would adjust my bar. So that's what I would say to that one, mate. So again, hope that helps you. Hope my amazing diagrams. You can see I was very, very high in my art class at school. It was always one of my very good talents, was art. So I hope that helps. Any comebacks, hit me up in the comments or in the group, and that we'll go from there. Cool. So let me go back to the chat now that I can actually see it. Yeah, nice. How's it going, sir? How's your foiling going? I haven't actually been out since then. Hopefully it's going to go very, very well soon. I've learned, see, the thing I've learned with doing this little experiment, this little adventure that I'm on, is never to pre-announce what you're going to do until you're actually doing it. Because as I've seen over the last 3 months, things inevitably go wrong. And at the moment, they seem to be going very, very wrong. So I haven't been kite surfing for about 3 or 4 weeks at the moment. I'm absolutely hanging out for it. I am hoping that that's about to change. But I'm not going to say any more about that, because whenever I do, it goes wrong and it leaves me in a hole trying to kind of backtrack from where I've been. So more on that when I am certain of what's going to happen. But there will definitely be more hydrofoiling coming, and I'm glad it's helping you out, mate. I'm really glad. It's an awesome, awesome thing. I mean, I've only done a little bit of it and I am hooked. Cannot wait to get out there again. Okay, Mary. So I've been out a bit and going pretty good. I'm totally independent and self-launched. Got out road. Yes! Come on. Come on. Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that, Mary. That is awesome. That is awesome. Brett, I'll come back to you in a minute, mate. I'll just finish going through these. Ah, cool, Ronnie. That helped. Sweet. Perfect. Good man. I'm told my shoulders are too far forward. Need to edge more. Tips not to do that. Yes. This is the shag don't shit, basically. What you are doing, shoulders are too far forward, basically means that you're basically leaning over. Let me see if I can show you this a bit better. So you're basically kind of leaning forward in that kind of simian stroke French toilet squat position. What you need to be doing is shagging. Get your hips forward and shag, because that throws your shoulders back. So what you're doing is that. What you need to do is that, and lean out on it, and that will naturally engage the edges. So I wouldn't worry. Don't worry about engaging the edge, because then you start using your feet. Nothing in kite surfing comes from your feet. It comes from your head. So what you can think about here is think about center line drawn through you into the board. If you're here, your head is actually in front of the board. You need to get your head behind the board. Why? Because my head is my biggest, my heaviest, especially on me who's got a huge head, is the heaviest count, and it's also the highest. So it's your point of counterbalance. So if it's behind me, naturally my weight's going back onto my heels. If it's in front of me, then I can try as much as I want to try and push weight through my heels. It's not going to work because my head is telling my body otherwise. My head is telling me to get my weight forward. So get your head back behind that board line and it will naturally drop you onto your heels. It also looks a lot cooler as well. This is not a cool pose. That looks really sexy. So so that's the big one, Mary. Get your shoulders back. Get your shoulders up by getting you, but get your hips forward and don't think about your shoulders. Think about your head. But again, don't worry too much about that. That will come with time. What I would say, if you're riding, just keep doing that. What we've tend to find is that actually this stance comes quite naturally as people get more comfortable with riding, because actually riding in that kind of shitting position, shooting off downwind, is not comfortable. And your body and your brain soon realizes that and goes, hang on a minute, there's got to be an easy way to do this. And it kind of figures out, yeah, this is the position you go into. And what we've seen over the course of the years is that by trying to force people into that position to start with, it actually kind of messes them up a little bit. So what we normally say is, look, just keep on doing what you're doing. If you're riding, keep on going. Keep on doing it, and just trying to get longer and longer and longer and control it more. Focus on the control. So focus on riding slow, because that naturally brings you into this position where your hips come forward, your shoulders come back, your edge engages, and you start to ride upwind. And I would much rather see someone riding kind of 2 meters and stopping, 2 meters and stopping, 2 meters and stopping, but doing it all under control, than someone tearing off at 5,000 miles an hour downwind and then exploding in a big heap at the bottom because they've got no control. Because that first person is going to learn to ride upwind much more comfortably than the second example. So that would be my first tip. Again, feel free to come back on me on that one, because there's loads of things we can talk about on this, but I don't want to overload you with too much stuff, because that is the big one, is hips forward, shoulders back. But it all comes from your head is the key. Your head controls your balance on the board. Brett, why is kitesurf so expensive? Are you talking about kitesurfing kit or kitesurfing lessons? Kitesurfing kit is probably so expensive because there's so little of it made. Basically, it's very expensive to ship. Obviously, it's all made in China and Japan, and the biggest markets are Europe and America, which is the other side of the world. And there's not many units made. I think the biggest manufacturer, which was North, certainly won't be North anymore, was only selling about 20,000 kites a year, which isn't a lot in kind of manufacturing industry terms when you look at it like that. And there's a lot of expenses to cover, marketing, R&D. I think half the problem with the kit, the reason why kit is so important to my mind, is the R&D cycle. Now, the R&D cycle for a kite is 1 year. And if you've ever bought like a 2017 kite, and then the next year bought the 2018 kite, there's never much difference. There's never much difference at all. But because they've kind of got this shit, we've got to do something new. And often the kites go backwards, because, oh shit, we'll try this. Oh, it doesn't work, we'll go back to the old one. And it's this point that they've got to bring out a kite every year, because it's the industry standard that forces the prices up, because there's this ridiculously fast R&D cycle, which means that they're releasing kit when actually last year's kite was fine, and there haven't been enough advances in either material or aerodynamic theory or technology to warrant a new kite. So this is, I'm not an expert. I don't make kites, but I would doubt if the manufacturers are rolling in cash. I would really, really doubt that. I certainly know, for a small kite company, you're not making a lot of money, and you might be selling your kites cheaper than the big boys, but you're still making very little cash, because it's just so expensive to actually make this stuff. So if you're talking about kites, that would be and boards and things like that. It generally comes down to what's the word I'm looking for? Quantity of, no, you know what I mean. Scale of, what's the term? There's a term for it. I don't know, but it means basically there's not enough made to make a production line out of it, basically. So you can't get those economies of scale. That's what I'm looking for. It basically comes down to economies of scale is the major reason. I would say the economies of scale and the R&D cycle are the two big problems, but they're driven by the market. Is the it's the whole thing. It's so it's kind of this never-ending cycle of it's a feedback loop like anything else. If they sell more, they'll probably be able to make them cheaper. Ah, right. Okay, cool. Mary, sorry, I missed that second point. When I'm going good, I can hardly reach the bar. Right. That is big. This is a really. There's two possible reasons to this. It could be that you are overpowered. Yes, it could. It could be that you're overpowered for sure. And the sweet spot, as we call it, is just miles out there. You will be able to tell if you're overpowered, you wouldn't be able to walk on the beach. You remember those days when you were with us in Tarifa? That was overpowered. That morning that we had, that was overpowered. Yeah. If it's not like that, if you're quite capable of walking on the beach and it's quite easy, it's because you're in that position. So now that you're heading downwind, you can barely reach it because you're kind of in this shitting stance. You're being pulled off downwind. So that is the natural point of the kite. And because you've got no edge, you've got no resistance. So you're just having to go with the kite. When you do that, look what happens. Suddenly my bar has come all the way in or a lot further in. So suddenly now I can grip it. I can grip that. My edge is engaged, but also I can hold on to the bar quite nicely at a nicely powered point. Now, you might think, oh, well, this is going to overpower me. And yet it does. But because you've engaged the edge in that position, the edge is now resisting the pull of the kite. And this is how you get shot out upwind. Riding in this position, you're just literally following the kite downwind because you're offering no resistance against it. So you're just being pulled in the direction of the kite. As soon as you pull the bar in, start to edge, you are now offering resistance. So you need that extra pull that you're generating, the extra power in the kite, because there's more resistance stopping you the other way. And again, it's that bar of soap between your fingers. You are the bar of soap that gets shot out in the perpendicular direction to the opposing forces. Yeah, so the kite's pulling you one way, the board's resisting in the other, you get shot out the other way. So this is why you need that shagging stance to engage the edge, to power the kite up, and so you can be shot out upwind. Okay? So again, Mary, hope that helps. And so stoked to hear that you are doing it. Yeah, exactly. Try getting your head back this Saturday. Try getting your head back, and you'll find that the bar naturally comes in. Okay, Oscar. You say the kite always naturally flies on the front and towards the side of the wind window, which turns as you move and the apparent wind separates from the true wind. Is that always the case? Doesn't the kite tend to naturally move towards the power zone in front of you? Only if you've got the bar all the way in and the kite is actually starting to stall slightly. The kite will always sit at the front of the window. What happens is the window itself moves. Yeah, which you obviously get. So towards the side of the window, which turns as you move, and the apparent wind separates from the true wind. Yeah. So as the kite always flies on apparent wind. So as the apparent wind increases because you move faster, that wind window moves backwards. Again, I'll probably draw this. I think you understand this though. I think you've got the basics of it. Let me just see if doesn't the kite tend to naturally move towards the power zone in front of you? No, because the power zone's not in front of you when you're riding. The power zone is kind of behind you when you're riding. Again, let me just draw this out on my amazing diagram. So normally your wind window is like that. Yeah. The arrow is the wind. That is your wind window. As soon as you start riding, so again, let me just draw this out. So you are riding in God, I can't do this, in this direction, yeah, which induces wind in the opposite direction. Now, the wind can't come from two different directions at once, so you get a third wind that forms, which comes from this big, ugly arrow there. Yeah. Now, this is the wind that your kite feels. So your wind window moves. Your wind window is now like that. Yeah. But your kite still flies at the front of the window. No, sorry, am I wrong here? No, sorry, it's still, where are you going? You're going that way. So it still flies, sorry, other side, still flies at the front of the window. Yeah. It just looks like it's further back towards the power zone. And as you speed up, this arrow actually moves further, or the wind moves further and further around here, which brings your kite further and further and further back towards what looks like the power zone. But actually, at this point, your power zone's somewhere over here because your wind window is shifted all the way through 90 degrees. Does that make sense, Oscar? I'm not sure if that's answered your question because I get the impression that you kind of get that, and maybe you're asking something else. Or maybe you just need clarification on one of those points. So again, just let me know in the chat if that covers what you're talking about, or if there's something else that you're missing there. I am actually in my parents' house at the moment. That's not my IKEA picture. Luca. And I'm glad to hear that your walk of shame is getting a lot less. Awesome, awesome, awesome. That is the key. Sibilon, great for you to be here, sir. Coming from Chile. Awesome, awesome. Okay, guys, let me just check I haven't missed anything. Okay, that looks like we've covered everything. So again, just let me know in the chat if you've got any more questions. This chat actually seems to work really, really nicely. I'm liking this. The other thing, I suppose, Oscar, that you've got to figure into this, and this is where it blows my mind, to be honest. This is where I start to lose any understanding of it. Is that okay? You've got the apparent wind generated from your movement on the water, but you've also got the apparent wind generated from sine waving the kite. So that will make a difference as well. Now, how that makes a difference is way beyond me, because obviously that's then going to generate apparent wind in all the other directions as the kite moves as well, which, to be honest, is just beyond me. But there is that factor as well to take into account. Mary, shoot, keep them coming. That's why I got it. I was confirming that the kite always flies on the front and side of the wind window and doesn't naturally go to the front of the shifted wind window. It does go naturally to the front of the shifted window, but the side and the front, if you see what I mean, it will never naturally go to the power zone ever. It always naturally goes to the front of the window. It can only sit at the front of the window. Naturally, you have to force it into the power zone. And that's why we do the figure eights or kite loops and things like this, to force it into the power zone. So again, I'm just maybe it's just something, maybe we're just on a different wavelength. But yeah, the kite will always fly on the front, and well, not necessarily the side, because when it's above your head, it's just flying at the front of the window, and you can sit there on the beach with it above your head quite happily. We all know that. But it will always sit naturally at the front of the window. Yeah. Yeah. I thought maybe you did, Oscar. Yep, cool. Yep, okay, cool. We're on the same wavelength. Sweet. I know to power stroke the kite to get more power, but how do I do it faster? Seems I'm too slow in doing it and I stall out. Right, I bet it's not to do with doing it too slow, Mary. I would imagine what it is, and this is this is what we see all the time in light winds, is that it's not that you're doing it. God, it is hot in here, so I'm just going to open a window. That's better. It's probably not that it's you doing it too slow. If you're coming up out of the water, that's all the power stroke is supposed to do. It's supposed to get you from being in the water to being on top of the water. If it's doing that, you've got enough power. If it's stalling out, then if you're riding like a meter or two and then stalling, I bet what you're doing is what 90% of people do in this situation is you're bringing the kite down. At that point, you're out of the water, but because it's light winds especially, your bars come all the way in. And you're thinking, okay, cool, I'm up, I'm riding, let's go. Oh, then you sink. Why? Because when the bar's in all the way in light winds, generally you will be oversheeted and the kite will be stalling. Also at this point, the kite has lost all the apparent wind that it generated by movement, and it's got to overcome gravity again. So it's massively, can you put this in face? Full of inertia. It is inersed. That's definitely not a way of saying it, but you know what I mean. It's got no momentum anymore, and it's got to overcome gravity to get back up. So at that point, if the bar's all the way in, the kite does just stall out. So what you've got to do is you sweep down. The bar will come in naturally, but don't get it all the way in. So have it out and then steer it back up again. Now, again, this is a real kind of delicate thing to say, oh, get it out, because then people go, oh, and then the bar's too far out. It's when I say out, it's like out, you know, in, out, in, out. That's the type of difference that you might be talking. Am I shouting? That you might be talking in light winds. You know, you might be talking a very, very, very tiny movement, but it's subtle enough to make a big difference. And this is the art of flying in light wind. This is why light wind flying is so useful, especially at the start when you're learning, because you have to be millimeter perfect in your control of the kite. Because if you're not, you can forget about it. It's not going to work. So when I say get the bar out, I might be meaning go from there to there, and suddenly the kite responds. And it won't respond instantly, but it will not stall, and it will start to steer back up again. So yeah. Similar, no problem, sir. No problem, sir. Thank you for joining. Yes, I thought it would be. Yeah. It's the classic, and it's obvious because you know we've been told all along you pull the bar in to get more power. So you think, well, it's light winds, cool. I'll pull the bar in, power up the kite, and get riding. And then suddenly you find out the kite's stalling on me. Yeah, because, and again, I'm going to explain this because this is, again, I might confuse people here with my terrible drawings and explanations, but hopefully this makes sense to a few people. Right, the optimum angle of attack for a kite. Your messages are being erased. That's weird. Huh. Well, I've just seen your last two, mate. I've just seen the can't chat and my messages are being erased. I promise you I'm not touching anything. That's weird though. And there's nothing. Well, I don't know. Okay, that's bizarre. Well, I have to say, I've just seen your last three, Similon. So they're definitely, those three are coming through. So when it comes to, again, light wind flying, let's just talk about why light wind flying is so difficult. I've just seen that one as well, Similon. I've just seen your emoji as well. So they seem to be coming through now. So your normal optimum angle of attack for a kite is between 12 and 16 degrees. Now, so that's when you pull the bar in, you want the kite between, let's say 0 is flat, let's say, so you want the kite at an angle of between 12 and 16. to have full power. Now, what happens in light winds is that drops to about, and again, this is very, very rough, and aerodynamic experts out there, don't hold me up on this, unless there's something that's important that I mess up here. That shrinks to about, effectively, it doesn't, but effectively it shrinks down to 14 degrees. So where you from 12 to 16, you've got a fairly large margin of error. You can hoik the kite a bit too much, you can let the bar out a bit too much, and you've still got a lot of power. In light winds, if you make a tiny, tiny mistake, you're suddenly out of the power zone, and you may have gone too far, and now the kite's going to start to backstall, or you may have let it off too much, and the kite doesn't have any power. So this is why light winds are so difficult, because everything becomes so much more subtle with the bar control, with respect to how far in or out you can have that bar, because the optimum angle of attack shrinks, just like effectively your wind window shrinks in light winds. Suddenly in light winds, it's really difficult to launch the kite at 90 degrees. You have to kind of take a few steps back with the kite before it will launch properly, because effectively your wind window has shrunk. So no, I don't mean, Mary, your stroke should be smaller. No, not at all. No, not at all. This is talking about the angle of the kite that way. Sorry, I've just confused things here. So when you talk about pulling in the bar, what I'm talking about here is why it's such a tiny movement rather than a massive movement on the bar, because your angle of attack, your optimum angle of attack has shrunk. So as soon as you go too far, the kite stalls. As soon as you go too far that way, the kite's got no power in it. So no, keep the stroke the same, but focus on not pulling the bar in too much, getting the bar out slightly to resend the kite back up again. So I'm sorry if I've just confused things there. Just let me know that makes sense, Mary, because I don't want to have just confused you there. Luca. Glad to hear it, Walter. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Luca, what to do when the kite is not in the natural position in the water and I can't get it up by pulling one line when it lays on the leading edge in the water? Cool, Mary, I'll come back to you in a second, Luca. All you've got to remember is what we talked about to start with. It's the bar in, bar out. Forget the second part. I've just confused you. Just head back, fling your head back, and as you're up and riding, get the bar out, but not too much, and send the kite back up again rather than having it stall down there at 9 o'clock. Yeah. So ignore the last bit. Forget about it. I've just confused things. I was trying to be clever. Never goes well. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe there is a limit. I've got a 200 character limit on my chat. So maybe that's it, Simulan. Maybe that is it. Maybe you'd need to break it up into smaller messages. I think that's probably going to be the problem. It only allows 200 characters on YouTube for whatever reason. So sorry, going back to yours, Luca. When it lays on the leading edge in the water, there is a few things you can do. You can try and reverse launch it. This may work. Reverse launching, you grab the backlight, these steering lines, and yank them. And then the kite some kites will do this, some kites won't. The kite will take off backwards, and then you can just let go of one, and the kite should sort of loop and steer around up and then come back around the right way, as long as you back launched it high enough to give it clearance to get back around. Not the most effective. In light winds, it's a struggle, to be honest. If your kite won't launch normally, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that with it. It's tricky. The other thing you can do, rather than using the outside line, you use one of the center lines. So you would use, let's say you're using the right-hand side steering line, you would use the left-hand side center line. So you pull it up onto its side with one, and then you pull the center line to kind of pull the bottom of the kite around into position as well. So that works really, really nicely for light. That's probably my preferred method for doing this, because that works quite nice, because now you're pulling the kite up on one side and through and under on the bottom side, and it just tends to drop it into that position really, really nicely. So that's something else you can do. The other one you can do is swim, which isn't much fun either. Start swimming around. So I would definitely recommend the second one. Use the outside line and the opposite center line. And just it's again, it's an art form, you know, but you'll quickly understand how it works when you're out there and you're doing it. But that's the best way I found of doing it. Or, you know, the other one that sometimes works is you swim away from the kite and then very fast swim towards it to try and drop it onto its back. I have very limited success with that, just because there's generally not enough friction now to drop them onto their back. So again, I go with the two-line option normally. It's like a hot launch, but backwards. So it's exactly like a hot launch, but backwards. So rather than pulling on the center lines to hot launch it, you would pull the steering lines and it launches backwards. But yeah, it's exactly like a hot launch. So a hot launch, for you guys who don't know what I'm talking about, is when the kite lands on its trailing edge and you just grab the center lines and give them a quick tug and the kite comes up. So this is the opposite, because the kite's landed on its leading edge and you pull the back. I always recall these. They're called steering lines. The steering line, the outside lines. Yeah, you pull those and it launches backwards. So then you've got to spin it around, because it will only launch a meter or two off the water. Walter, I was out last week in 10 to 12 knots with an 18-meter LAI, but my board was just 138. Couldn't get upwind. Was my board too small? It's impossible for me to say that without knowing an awful lot. Like, what was the wind and waves like? How much do you weigh? How good are you? Things like this. And really, I mean, don't bother writing it, because it's more a case of you would have to actually see it to tell you exactly what was going on. How's your technique? Things like that. Your board certainly will make a huge difference. Definitely. You know, your ability to get upwind, if you're a big guy especially, then, you know, a 138 could be looking, especially if, you know, if you're a big guy who's maybe, you know, kind of beginner intermediate level, on choppy water, for example, then yeah, you know, a bigger board is definitely going to help. A bigger board is always going to help you get upwind, would be my answer to that, Walter. So if it's something that you find you consistently struggle with, a big board would be something I would look, you know, a proper light wind board, a 155, a 160, something like that, or a surfboard or a foil board would be something that I would probably think about using, because yeah, the board is, you know, with 80, you know, you're not going to go any bigger with your kite. So the next variable you look at is the board. So yeah, I would suggest, if you are really struggling for that, it's the board size, to be honest, mate. That's the next thing I would look at. That's the next place I would look. Ooh, Simeon, I fully feel your pain, sir. I learned to windsurf in a lake and then went to Tarifa. Never learned to ride. Right. The biggest difference between lake riding and beach riding, obviously, is waves. The biggest tip I can give you for waves is you have to suddenly turn your body into suspension, by which I mean your legs suddenly, well, your whole body really, from your shoulders down to your ankles, has to become one big kind of spring, and you absorb those waves. The other thing you need to look at the beach was the wind 90 degrees to the beach, mate. You can forget about it. It's so hard. It's so hard to get out when the wind is dead on shore. It's almost impossible, mate. It really is. That's the total baptism of fire, buddy. Why? Because basically, when, let's say this is your beach and the arrow's your wind, what's happening? That wind is pushing. The waves are now coming. Any chop generated by that wind is now being pushed straight onto the beach as well. And there'll be a lot of it generally. Any swell is being pushed straight onto the beach pretty much. and your kite is being pushed back up onto the beach. Also, it means that because the wind is onshore, it's knocking the tops off the waves, so the waves are breaking earlier than they normally would. So they're not holding up; they're just being sort of squashed down. So you get a lot of white water, and the white water is moving water. Green water we don't care about, because green water is just energy pulsing through the water. The water itself doesn't actually move. White water is a moving wall of water. So it makes those conditions almost impossible. I mean, we get them in Tarifa when it's Poniente, when it's the winter stormy Poniente. And, it's even the guys who've ridden there for years and years and years really, really struggle to get out. It's just a nightmare because that wind is just pushing everything back onto the beach. So I wouldn't say, don't get any way disheartened by that, mate. What I would say is search for a beach where the wind is more cross on shore, because that's going to be a lot easier, buddy. 9 degrees is a nightmare. It's difficult. It's really, really tough. So yeah, the best tip there: search for another beach. Search for a beach where the wind isn't coming in that way, and you'll find it a lot easier. Yeah, Walter, great thing from Mary, mate. We're very light window, and all the guys ride 17-meter kites and these huge boards. Yeah, good, good Similon. Yeah. No, it's awful. It's the most dangerous conditions as well. It's statistically onshore winds are the most dangerous. Why? Because not for massive injuries generally, but it's when most injuries happen, because again, everything's being pushed back to the beach. You can't even walk out through the waves. It's just a nightmare. You can, especially if you've combined that with a deeply shelving beach. It's just impossible, because you can walk out maybe 10 meters, and by the time you've tried to get the board on your feet and get water starting, you're back on the beach again. So it's just not going to happen. If you've got a super shallow onshore, then it's a bit easier. At least you can walk out 300 meters past the shore break and go from there. But otherwise, you've just got no hope, mate. You've got no hope. So yeah, that's the problem there. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Toby. And hopefully that not being a kite surfer yet doesn't last too much longer. Hopefully you will get there, sir. Couldn't even, no, sorry, you can't even body drag. Body dragging doesn't help. You send it back on the beach. Or you can't keep hold of your board, because your board gets ripped out of your hands by all the waves and the wind and ends up back on the beach, even if you do get out the back. It's just horrible. So good effort for trying, mate. Good effort for trying and keeping going. DP Wild 328. Tips for landing jumps. Where are you struggling? I would say is the big one. Is it just kind of landing, or is it landing them? Are you just landing in a heap? Are you landing as you're gliding? Are you just kind of twisting in the air and not getting anywhere near the landing? Just let me know what more specifically you're struggling with, mate, and I'll be able to help you on that one. Walter, I think you're carrying a line cutter. I think every kite surfer on the planet should be obliged to carry a line knife. Definitely. If I carry one, not for me, I don't think you'll ever use a line knife for yourself, because you just won't be in a position to do it. But I have never had to cut my lines, but I've had to cut other people. I've been in a position where I wished someone did have a line knife and was cutting my lines. They didn't have one. It was my mum, and she was waving at me because she thought I was waving at her when I was actually saying, shit, I'm in trouble. It was her first visit out to Tarifa. Her first visit to Tarifa. Says, look at this, mum, I'll show you what I can do. Went on the water, pump, line snapped, all the lines got wrapped around my leg, started getting dragged out towards the sea. I was giving her this. She was just waving back. So yeah, I wish she had a line knife at that point, but no, she didn't. But no, that's the point. I think everyone should carry a line knife, not for you, but for the guy next to you, the guy or girl next to you. Because if they get caught or tangled in the lines, you want to be able to cut their lines. So that's why I think line knives should be an obligatory bit of kit for everyone. You may never, ever, ever use it, and hopefully you never have to use it. And, realistically, most people never will. But again, it's that one time that you do need it, you want it there. And you could save someone's life with it. Let's be realistic. So, yeah, I would definitely. And luckily, most harnesses these days come with them built in. But as well, just check the blade every now, just oil the blade every now and again. What you need to do to keep it sharp, because they do rust up. Even though they shouldn't do, they do go blunt fairly quickly. So yeah, I do believe everyone should be wearing one. Oh God, that does sound awful. Jesus. Yeah, but again, exactly. I mean, there's nothing to say that anyone could do something with a line knife in all these situations, but I would feel awful if I was in that situation and wasn't able to do anything because I didn't have a line knife, and that's kind of the way I look at it. So yeah, go and get yourself one, and they're cheap. They're only 20 quid or something. Similon, I've wanted to visit Chile. You know, the original reason I went to Spain was to learn Spanish and go to Chile, and I never got there. So it's still, 15 years later, it's still on my hit list. I chose Santander, Spain, as a bank because they operated in Chile as well. That was my whole thinking behind the reason I did banking with them in Spain, and still never got there. So it's definitely on my hit list, mate. DP1, landing in a heap and landing softly without too much speed when I'm not in a heap. Cool. I would suggest then the problem is not sending the kite. You are probably keeping the kite at 12 o'clock as you are coming down. As soon as you start to drop, send the kite. And what I mean by send the kite from 12 o'clock back down toward 9 or 3 o'clock, because that pulls you forward and glides you out. And then all you've got to do is point the board in the direction that you're going, and that's how you land it. And it also keeps you more stable. It stops you from kind of twisting out too much. So yeah, that's why they have nice floaty soft landings, because they're either sending the kite. The other thing you can do, don't worry about this just yet, you can start heli looping the kite. Don't worry about that. Just get used to sending the kite down again. So you literally jump, you send the kite up, you jump. As soon as you're at the top of your jump, or literally to start with, when you're doing smaller jumps, literally as soon as you get airborne, start sending the kite back down again. So literally the kite goes. That's the movement of the kite, and it makes that noise as well, obviously. So that gives you that nice floaty soft landing, and it also stops you landing in a heap. It means that you glide out of the landing, and it protects your knees, so you don't damage your knees because you're actually floating rather than kind of slamming. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, 10 minutes left. Oscar, any tips about board specs for beginners? This is it's not a tough question, it's an easy question, but it's very much dependent on, it's a good question, but it's very much dependent on what you want to do. You've got basically, but as I look at it on a very, very basic scale, you have two options here. You can go very, very big, like door style, light wind board thing, which will make your life very, very easy to start with, because it's big, it's floaty, it's really forgiving, and it rides up wind like the clappers. But you will probably, unless you're in a light wind spot in general, get bored of it fairly quickly. Because when you start to do jumps and more dynamic moves, it feels like you've got, an oil tanker on the bottom of your feet, and it's not very forgiving in more extreme conditions. As soon as you start getting into waves and things like that, the extra length, you really notice it, because it just starts catching on waves, tripping the rails, things like that. So your other option is to go kind of medium, which could be anything from, for most blokes, between 135 and 138. Again, a bit smaller if you're on the smaller side, a bit bigger if you're on the bigger side, which is going to be a bit harder to start with, for sure. It's going to make your life more difficult. Why? Because it's going to sink quicker. But you will grow into it, and it will last you for the next 5 years if you need it to. So again, it comes down a little bit to how much you're prepared to spend, how often you're going to be going, and how patient you are with learning. If you've got no patience, I would go with a big board. If you don't mind, cool, I'll just take my time with this, but I don't want to spend much money, go with the medium board and go from there, would be my suggestion. We do go into kit and buying kit in a huge amount of detail in the course that we do, the knock weeks off your time to ride and save hundreds on your kite surfing lessons, which is available on our website. We go into that in tons of in much more detail than I can go into on this call. I think it's about 8 hours of videos in there explaining about kit and what to buy and things like that. So if you want to check that out, go and have a look at that. That might really help you out as well. My voice is starting to go. You can hear that. There we go. Okay, so 5 minutes left. So if anyone has got any more questions or any follow-ups, anything I haven't answered properly, or anything that just needs clarification, just bang them in the chat. As far as material and rocker goes, material and rocker outline, i.e. size, is the only thing really that you need to care about at this point. Material, rocker, flex, all those different characteristics will follow the outline. What do I mean by that? I mean, you would be mad to have a huge 160 centimeter board with a shit ton of rocker, because they're absolutely in opposition to each other. So you would get a 160 board and it would have the rocker that you require for a light wind board. So really, this is why boards are quite simple. And I have a simple rule with boards. The more boring it looks, the more boring it will ride. But boring is a very good thing for a beginner. So you can walk in the shop and you can instantly see, that's a door. It's boring, but it's probably great if I'm just starting out. That one looks mega aggressive. It's going to be aggressive to ride, which isn't what a beginner wants. Although it will look very sexy, and you'll be able to impress the chicks with it. If chicks are impressed by that, I don't know. Never have been by my boards, to be fair. So maybe that's not the case. But it will be more aggressive to ride. It'll be much more unforgiving, much more difficult to ride. No problem, Similon. Thank you very much, sir. See you next time. Nice one, Mary. Do that. I look forward to speaking to you next week, and certainly let me know how it goes. Good luck on Saturday. No problems, Oscar. Cheers, buddy. See you later, Mary. Sorry, D-God, I haven't forgotten about you. If you don't dive your kite as you land, the jump, and just moving it back and forth over your head, what will happen? Basically, you just kind of plummet. If you're looping it, yeah, it will give you a nice soft landing that way. But you will just, if you keep it above your head, you just tend to drop. Generally drop, maybe twist, do something. You generally don't want it above your head. You want it above your head kind of as you're going up, and as soon as you're hitting the top, you want it moving from that point, redirecting. Generally feels like I'm down my camera and just feels like I pick up too much speed, right? Maybe you're sending it too fast. That's the other thing. Maybe you're sending it too fast and not quite pointing your board fully downwind. So maybe send it a little bit slower. As I say, it's a floaty drift down. It's not an aggressive water start type send. It's a floaty drift down, and make sure your board is pointing downwind. Would be the other thing that maybe you are doing wrong there in that case. Okay, guys, that is it from me for today. Thank you very much for joining. Hope that was useful. And I will speak to you. I'll speak to you guys who are in the group. I'll speak to you tomorrow morning in the group. For the rest of you, maybe, well, this seemed to work really well. So maybe we will actually use YouTube as our live streaming channel. This chat works really nicely. So let's see. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. And I will speak to you next week. Have a good one.